says it's recording.
Awesome. Well, I am here with my friend, Dr. Stacey Harrell, who has been in education for, 26 years, you said? A long time. Taught almost every grade, I think. Littles, middles, high school, and college.
Yeah.
So I met Dr. Harrell at Literacy First Charter School over at the high school and was very impressed with her, just the way she interacted with kids and worked with them. She was teaching math at the time, and you're still head of math for Literacy First, aren't you? The math department, as well as the school counselor for the whole school.
Well,
you have help.
Yes. For social and emotional health.
Social and emotional health. Yeah. And so YFC San Diego has leaned in on Dr. Harrell a lot, and she's been gracious to help us with training our counselors in trauma-informed care. We've done some restorative practices. So when this all happened, I've called on her just for some help. We already know that teenagers today had already been struggling with depression and anxiety for many reasons. We don't have time to go into all of that today, but now we've added a pandemic on top of that. So I asked Dr. Harrell just to come help us a little bit, one, as a youth worker, I'm concerned, but also as a parent of an 8-year-old and a 13, almost 14-year-old. How are kids doing right now? What should we be watching for? And kind of, if you don't mind sharing just a little bit about what you've been seeing. Sure. And any practical tips out there for us that are trying to navigate this world with our kids would be great.
Yeah. If you lean in, you won't disappear.
Awesome.
Yes. Well, I'm going to go ahead and screen share because I have a presentation to show that'll keep me kind of on track. And then that way I can kind of walk through it with you. But there's definitely been an increase with kids feeling anxious and worried and depressed, and not just kids, but adults too. And so because of that, it can then compound the effect even more. If the home is stressed and the kids are stressed, and that can just be even more so. So I thought we could talk about some of the basics and some good ways.
I told her I loved
through.
her background, yes. Just because I already feel calmer.
That's a good thing, is to surround yourself with calming things. This is Bushard Gardens up in Canada. So every week I have to change it to a new calming place.
Smart.
Yes. So I'm going to share my screen so you all can see it. And that way you can also see us still. Okay, I'm going to put this up in the corner. So I was just talking about the idea of mental wellness in general. Mental well-being encompasses both our, our social, emotional, mental, physical, all of that together. And so we would just want to make sure that we're looking at the whole picture, because if one part isn't doing well, then the whole part won't be doing well. So mental health is really, sorry, it went through it way too quickly on me. We're going to try that again. All right.
Read fast, everybody.
Yes.
Read fast.
Woo. The state of mental and emotional well-being is what we're specifically going to talk about today. So that's the first part. And I'm not sure. Let's see. Hopefully it won't go ahead. Maybe I pressed play instead. Mental illness then is actually diagnosable illness that affects a person's thinking, emotional state, and behavior. And so we're going to talk a little bit about stress and worry and things like that, and then actual anxiety and depression, which are different categories. All right. So your question was,
my question is, what are you, because you're still working with kids right now.
Yeah, I'm Zooming.
You guys are doing Zoom meetings.
We're Zooming with, our school is a K-12 school. So we have elementary, we have middle school, we have high school. And I mostly work with middle school, high school. And so the things that I'm kind of seeing are increase in worry by far, anxiety, fear, stress, being overwhelmed, feelings of hopelessness, also increase in suicidal thoughts. I've had to do more suicide checks on kids, definitely in this time, and attempts. Unfortunately, the increase, we know nationwide has shown that it has gone up. Child abuse also, we know that the teachers are usually the ones reporting potential child abuse. And since students are not with their teachers, The rates have gone down of actual reportings, but that also worries us that there's more going on that's being unreported. Domestic violence we know is on the increase as well. But then on other end of it, the loss of connectedness. Kids just don't feel connected. And a lot of adults don't either. Safety, their well-being, they want to hope that they're going to be okay. Learning, definitely, kids worry about that because they worry about their future. Our seniors losing their graduation and things like that. It's been really hard for a lot of our seniors. And then of course their friends. When they say, I really miss my friends, I said, yeah, me too, because
I know, I said, yeah, me too.
a lot of the teachers are my friends. And so we're both kind of feeling that loss right now. And that's a lot for kids to deal with. So what does stats say in general? Before the pandemic, we know that about 13% of kids will experience a mental health condition living in the United States. And so that kind of gives you a perspective of where it was before. And about 17% of high school students will seriously consider suicide at some point in their life or during their high school career. And so that's just kind of give you an idea of the general state beforehand. And then there was a recent, I don't want to say study because it wasn't necessarily a survey. It was a recent survey done in the state of California to a whole lot of students. And they noticed that the pre-pandemic, they asked the students on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your mental wellness? And 65% of them said 7 or above. However,
great.
Oh, it's great. Yes, there's a lot there, and we know that a lot of kids are doing great and doing wonderful things. And but we do have kids definitely that anxiety and depression are increasing. We have a lot with anxiety, and we'll go into that a little bit more later. But during the pandemic, we also see that on that same scale, it's now lower than 40% that rate themselves the same, and 23% were rated a 3 or less now. And that just shows you that dramatic impact that kids were already dealing with it. And now it's just been increased dramatically.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. So students are expressing being bored. Definitely. I know I feel bored a lot. Lonely. It's that connectivity. Anxious, overwhelmed with schoolwork, worried about the well-being of their family, general uncertainty of what's going to happen and when, and missing out on all their high school experience or middle school experience too, because middle schoolers are going through this as well. The survey was just done for high school kids.
Well, and I know for me, when I get bored, I turn on the news or start looking at the social media feeds, and it's really depressing.
It is.
And so I think it could just be escalating for the kids.
Oh, definitely. And especially because they're by themselves so much, they don't have any, they can potentially not have any downtime from it. And so that is something that we're going to definitely talk about, because we have to be careful not to overexpose our youth. So what are youth stressed about? Well, in general, again, before pandemic, we know that the increase in anxiety and depression, we're looking at school, like their classes, their tests, their academics, fear of failure, pressure to keep up their grades because they need good grades to hopefully go to college or do the things that they want to do. Generally overwhelmed just by all they have to do. Too many of our families are just too busy, honestly. If a kid is never home any evening until really late, then they never have any downtime, and everybody needs a little bit of downtime. But right now we've had too much downtime, so that's kind of
we just went to the two extremes, and now nobody knows what to do. That would be my teenager. We were gone every single night of the week, and then you go to nothing.
And it's just an abrupt halt. Pressure to get more, to do more to get into college. Then social, personal, definitely friends, family, relationships, current events like news, disaster, politics, and social media and texting. They really have that fear of missing out, the FOMO, right? So kids really think that they're not going to be there for their friends if their friend really needs them, or they're going to miss out on a conversation or an activity or something like that. And so because of that, that has definitely increased a lot of stress in a lot of our young people today. Additional current stressors, though, in this time of pandemic, we're definitely talked about the lack of connectedness, financial problems. A lot of families are having big financial problems, and I know a lot of students whose family members lost their jobs, and so now they have to wait in line for food, and they have to hope that, you know, they can come up with finances for rent and things like that. Um, and that creates an additional stress. And if you're worried about that, it's kind of hard to focus on, you know, online school or anything like that right now, or, you know, just hope for the future if you're stuck in that. And that makes
Mhm.
it really, really difficult. We also have, you know, quite a few older kids who are now babysitting because the parents are maybe working. And so they have to help the siblings do school. And then they finally get to do school late at night and they're already exhausted. And by the
Mhm.
time they try to even do school, it's hard for them to do that. So they would rather see their siblings succeed, and make sure they're doing okay. And they
Mhm.
take that burden on even more. And so
Mhm.
that can create a lot of problems. So this idea of financial problems is pretty overwhelming for a lot of families right now. Lots of fun events, because a lot of, you know, those are the things we
Yeah.
look forward to. You know, the dances, the sporting events, the different events we have. They're losing out on those things, and that's hard for them. Yeah, definitely. Family tension. I know, I talk to a lot of wonderful couples who have wonderful marriages, but they've been together a little bit too much. So
Yes.
from hearing from them, definitely just in that dynamic that there's family tension, much less if there was already some issues going on beforehand. So families are definitely feeling a lot of tension, and everybody is together, I think, too much, especially families who live maybe in a small apartment,
Mhm.
and the kids don't have a backyard or don't have an area to go play in. And, you know, they're just kind of cooped up too much for too
Mhm.
long. And then what do they do to try to escape? Well, they usually go to social media or video games, or, you know, turn on the TV. The whole family does, and so that becomes really, really, accelerates the problems. So, how can you help? That's what you asked me,
That's,
right?
yeah. So now what do I do with all that as a parent or somebody that works with teens?
Yeah. And again, it can be a mentor, it can be a parent, it can be a grandparent, it can be anybody. But maintain those healthy habits. Those are really, really, really important to make sure that we're maintaining. It's too easy to buy a bunch of, you know, junk food and, things like that, and just, you know, have all that in our house right now, or not go outside, at all. And again, those healthy habits are important. We need exercise, we need nutrition, we need all that stuff even more now than even before. And so the
Mm.
second thing is, don't judge youth, be calm and accepting. And so too often I hear, I will hear some conversations, and maybe the students saying that they're worried about something, and they might say, oh, you don't need to be worried. So they just negate their feelings, and that's not
Mm.
good. So instead, we don't want to judge them or say, what do you have to be worried about? I'll tell you what you know, anything like that is just not going to be good. So be calm and accepting and listen is really, really important. And that's the next one. Have conversation time. I know some families that when they get in the car to go to school and when they come home in the car, that there are no devices, nothing, they just chat. Or they come home in the first 15 minutes, everybody has to put their devices out on the table and they just have a conversation about the day. Some people, it's during, you know, family dinner time, which I think is a lost thing for a lot of families,
Mhm.
which is sad because that is a time when a lot of kids feel comfortable talking. So those are really, really important. Just have that conversation and listen without trying to solve all the problems or give lots of input. You know, oh, that's not, you know, you should do this or you should do that. They kind of have to figure that out, but you can kind of guide them and help them. But don't tell them they shouldn't feel that way. And certainly make sure that you're kind of giving them that time to just share and don't get upset. Just listen and then walk through that with them.
I think one of the things I noticed with mine, she's in eighth grade and was really looking forward to eighth grade graduation and the trip to Knott's Berry Farm. And so we'll talk about it. And then I think she's okay. And it will come up again 10 days later. So it's not like they can just stop their feelings. It
No,
kind of keeps coming
no.
up. This process of grieving,
Mhm.
they could be okay for a little while, but then it might be an issue in 2 weeks again.
It's true. And that's same just in life in general. Those things do creep back up quite often with kids. And so we have to come back to it and walk them through, you know, but let them kind of figure out how to do that a lot of times
Mm.
by asking those kind of questions. Well, what do you think? Well, what happened? So what do you think would make it better? And what could you do to change
So if I
things?
say, just get over it, that was
That
not the
doesn't
right.
work. I think we've all had those moments. I'm a mom. My son
Like, it
is
could
just
be
grown.
worse. Come on.
I know, definitely. No warning signs, and we're going to go over warning signs at the end, definitely. But in this time of pandemic, it's just that things have accelerated, gotten worse than before, definitely. If kids are just avoiding anything, sleeping, they're sleeping, 15 hours a day. That is not a good thing at all. Things like that. And so, if they are withdrawing from everything, if they're constantly on video games or on social media or on their phones, that's also not healthy. But we'll go deeper into some bigger warning signs a little bit later on in the conversation. Create a mental healthy, friendly environment. So validate people's feelings in general. I think that's just a good rule for everybody. Allow them time to talk about it. Teach them different coping skills and some management techniques. And so I'm going to go over that, some coping skills in a few minutes. But management techniques, doing a good old fashioned planner. And okay, from 9 to 10, I have to work on math and from, things like that. And by doing that, if they have that plan, then they tend to be much more successful. And they feel, okay, I know it's coming next. I know it's coming next. And at the end of the day, they feel like they've accomplished something. So management techniques are really, really important, which goes on to the routine and the schedule. Having that routine and schedule over and over again is really, really important.
And so just back to you for a second, validating their feelings and allow them to talk about it. What if you have one of the teenagers that when you ask them how they're doing, you get the I'm fine? I mean, mine's pretty chatty, but
a lot of them do that.
I hear that a lot from parents where good.
So we just usually, what I do, because again, I get kids in my office at the high school quite often when we're on campus, and they'll just come in sometimes and wander in, and they don't, how you doing? Oh, I'm fine. Oh, okay. So we just start talking about other stuff quite often and just having a conversation and sitting and listening. And a lot of times it ends up starting to come out. Or they, and if they feel safe and comfortable, they're going to come and talk to you about it. But they have to know that you're going to not negate their feelings. And that is really, really important. So it takes some time to trust, or sharing how you're feeling sometimes, but not putting them on them. So for example, I say, sometimes I'm worried about making sure that I get this done and this done and this done, but then I make a routine and it kind of helps me with it. What have you tried? Have you felt worried at all? And then, now they'll start sharing, because I just kind of share that, it's okay. We have that. We all have that in our lives. And so that has worked very well with a lot of young people that I work with, definitely. But that I'm fine. Well, tell me one great thing that happened at school today. Tell me one thing that was really, really hard today. Things like that. So it's just those leading questions that can kind of help get them to that.
Good.
Yeah.
And giving them time, because sometimes they'll be quiet for 20 minutes and then it finally comes out.
Exactly.
Patience.
That's okay. Yeah. Encourage good health. So again, making sure that there is a balance of school and outside activities, and limit screen time. Screen time has definitely increased a lot of anxiety for a lot of kids overall, pre-pandemic, but definitely during this time, I think it's accelerated. And just having some balance of school time, but with outside time too. They can't just do school. That's not healthy for them. And then the next one is sleep, nutrition, exercise. So young adults, teenagers should be getting 8 to 10 hours of sleep a day. And if they're not getting at least 8 to 10 hours of actual sleep, not when they go lay in their bed, then that is not healthy, because their brain is not going to develop the way that it needs to necessarily develop, because it's not getting enough rest. And we know that when we sleep, that's our body's time to heal and grow and all that kind of stuff. And so their frontal lobe is not fully developed till they're 22 to 25 years old. So they need that time in order to allow that to happen. Now, if a kid, again, is sleeping like 15 hours a day, that's also not healthy at all. And it does happen. That's a big sign of depression a lot of times. Nutrition, eating healthy, fruits, vegetables, things like that, healthy grains, healthy proteins, all that kind of stuff. It really does make a difference with kids. I know that there was a research study that came out a couple of years ago talking about people who struggle with depression. that if you look at diets, there's a good portion, that if they eat a lot of processed foods and unhealthy foods, that it has an impact definitely on their depression. And so that makes sense because they're putting all kinds of chemicals and different things like that in their body, and which can interact or interfere with the things that they're trying to do to, be healthier. Exercise is really, really important because it releases endorphins and it gets rid of cortisol. And so endorphins are the happy chemical in our brain that kind of help us feel better. And cortisol is the stress hormone that builds up over time. And we have too much cortisol. It's not good for our bodies at all. And it's not good for our mental health. But when we start releasing it through exercise and then we gain endorphins on top of it, it's one of the best coping skills you can do. I talk to the kids about just simply balancing and stretching because, if you're balancing and stretching and really, or yoga or something like that, then you have to pay attention to this moment because if you don't, you're going to fall on your face. And so it helps. Same with playing like soccer. You have to pay attention to what you're doing in that moment because if you don't, you might get hit by the ball or you won't make the score. Or you might block the score, the goal. So exercise is really, really, really good. Even just going for a hike, going for walks, any of that kind of stuff. Zumba, dance, any of that. It's really, really good for kids to do any kind of exercise. And then the next one is know where resources are available. And that is something that a lot of times your school counselor can help you find. Or 211 is another area. It's in both the website and the phone number that you can contact to find out about different resources. And be aware of our own behaviors and how we're modeling things. Because if we demonstrate worry and fear, then our kids are going to see that as well. And so it's really important that we think about our own behaviors, the own words that come out of our mouth. The things that we are watching that our kids are watching. And quite often we think they're busy. Oh, they're not watching it. No, they're hearing it and they are watching it. You'd be surprised. And then we're modeling all of these things. We can't just tell the kids to go out and exercise and then not do it ourselves, especially teenagers. They're going to call you out on it.
I'm going to go throw away that package of Oreos.
Well, those are sometime food, right? Once in a while food, just not all the time food. And in this stressful era, it's too easy for them to become all the time food, right? So self-care, what are some really good things to do? Definitely get your body moving, walk, run, dance, yoga. We talked about healthy snacks, making sure that you have that. Social support. So just doing even Zoom with your family or with friends, or I've seen different classes do a Zoom birthday party, and, or just to chat and hang out and things like that. So I think that can be a really good thing for a lot of families to have that connection with each other, or mentors with youth, just making sure that you're spending that time just to be connected with them. Of course, Zoom is not as good as in person, but that does kind of help at least.
In time, we'll be back.
Yes, yes. Mindfulness is a practice of really just being, paying attention to this moment right now. And it's too easy to go to what if, or that happened. And that is not good for our mind. So instead, bringing ourselves back to this moment right now, being present. And so some of that can happen. Meditation is great for a lot of people. I know a lot of athletes do meditation. But for me personally, because I'm a faith-based person, when I meditate, I actually meditate on God's word. And so that's how I bring that into what it is that I'm doing. And so I'm focusing in on God's word and God's scripture. So meditation can be a very broad category. It doesn't have to be just one type of meditation. And then some deep breathing techniques can be really, really good. There's a lot of apps that will walk you through that, like Calm and things like that, Headspace, all those apps, and just walk you through some really good different deep breathing techniques, because that's getting more oxygen into our blood. It helps us feel better as well. And it helps us calm and focus on this moment right now, which is where our mind should be. Listening to music is a great one. I love music, but I always tell my
Mhm.
students that if they're feeling kind of depressed, please don't listen to sad music because, and that's exactly what they tend to go
Mm.
to,
Mhm.
because somebody else understands what they're feeling.
Mhm.
And so that's quite often what happens. But we say, well, that's not a good place, honestly. We want to
Mhm.
listen to music that kind of changes our mood. So,
Mhm.
for example, my son, when he played football, he would listen to really like, music that was really fast and that kind of just got him ready for the football game. But if I'm
Sure.
trying to relax and settle down because I'm already kind of really busy that day, then I'll listen to maybe something calm. And
Mhm.
so, music really can impact our mood, but make sure that we're listening to the music that's going to make a positive impact. So, uh,
You should just every so often check what they're listening to,
yes,
period.
in general. Oh, I agree. Definitely. Yeah. Make a list of your passions and interests. That's always a good thing, definitely. Also, a gratitude list. That's another thing I do with a lot of students.
Mm.
They just write down 5 things they're thankful for, and the next day they have to write down 5 things that and they can't repeat. And
Mm.
so, after 100 days of doing it, it's pretty amazing how much it impacts them.
Mhm.
So, making a list of passions or interests or things to be grateful for really can have a huge impact on
Mhm.
people. A routine, again, we talked about sleep 8 to 10 hours a day. Doing something fun with your family, whether it's family movie night. I know some teachers who are doing that every night with their family. They just watch a movie and have popcorn together and hang out.
Mhm.
And they get to see some of these older movies that maybe they never, they've heard their parents talk about, but they have no idea what they are, and
Mhm.
then they can rate them or not. And a family game night is great. Good old fashioned board games. I can't tell you how much I've played board games with young people, and they just love it because you're just sitting there focusing on them and you're not doing anything else.
Mhm.
And they actually like board games and they like sitting and playing a game with somebody.
Mhm.
Some of them will sometimes grump and, oh, I don't do that. I'd rather play a video
They will.
game. But once they start playing,
Mhm.
they love it. They absolutely love it. Take a technology break and maybe even a family technology
Mhm.
break. So the entire family for an hour or 2 hours or whatever all
Mhm.
puts down their phones.
Mhm.
I highly recommend family dinner time, sitting and talking if possible for families, and that technology is put aside, definitely.
Mhm.
That is really, really important just to have that time to listen because then teenagers will talk to you. But
Mhm.
if you're on your phone, a lot of times they think you're busy and they don't want to bug you.
Yep, or that you don't care, or you're not really listening.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So those are important, some strategies. Okay. So social media, we talked a bit about that is one of the big contributors to increased anxiety right now. I mean, there's positive things about social media too. I do lots of exercise videos and thank goodness
Mhm.
they're out there and they're free. And so there's a lot of really great things out there. It's just learning to help kids find that balance. And so looking at their apps, looking at, things like that, um, it's okay to look at their phone and what they're texting and the apps that they have and the things that they're, are out there and either,
Mhm.
Instagram accounts and things like that, because it's important for people to know what their kids are doing. And sometimes, oh, you just don't trust me. You don't trust me is what I hear students say sometimes. And I said, no, I want to prevent anything, negative from happening to you.
Mhm.
Because unfortunately, there's people out there who would love to take advantage of you. And so
Mhm.
it's my job as a parent to protect you, or my job as a mentor or a help support to kind of help with that. And so that's what I kind of talk to. It also creates a lack of face to face connection. This is important, having that
Mhm.
time just to actually see each other and talk. Smartphones, constantly checking. How many of us do that? We check our phone how many times a day?
It was pretty bad.
And so that's not good. Again, the fear of
Mhm.
missing out. So kids are doing that even more so. And again, since their frontal lobe's not fully developed, they lack some of those critical thinking skills. They don't see big picture. That's why quite often they only see this and we say, well, in 20 years from now, they don't think big picture.
Mhm.
And that's because their brain's not fully developed yet.
Mhm. That's a
And
good reminder.
yeah. Um, there's just a relentless comparison to their peers, grades, or the person got this on a test and I only got this, or that person, looks like this and I look like that. And, all these kinds of different comparisons. That person always scores the goal and I don't, and, things like that. So that is a big one. Overexposure to violence in politics. And right now, pandemic issues. If families have the TV going on with the news media all the time, the kids are hearing it, and it's increasing their stress and their worry, because it's also increasing a lot of adults' stress and worry. And we have seen that people who tend to watch that all day, if you hear negativity all day, well, then that's going to impact how you feel. We know that to be true in life, that if people just hear negative words all day, then it does have an impact on their, mental well-being. Definitely. And then negative messages that are out there, possibly, on Snapchat or things like that. But there's a lot of negativity that can be out there. And if you're not watching it, your kids are being exposed to it a lot. And then informational overload. They're getting too much information that they don't necessarily need at this point in time, or it's just too much worrisome type of talk. And that's not going to help them, rather than hopeful talk on how to make things better, how to change things, how to improve things. That's the kind of talk that they need to hear. And something to kind of think about is this generation has never lived without social media. They've had smartphones around their whole lives. And so if we kind of think about that, we can understand why they don't think it's such a big impact, as we know through research has shown it is, because they don't know any different. It's all they've ever known. And so because of that, they don't see what kind of an impact it is. But if you can convince them to put it away for a while, and I've had students do this. I've had students put away their phone. They make sure that their phone is in their parents' room at night when they sleep. And that helps them get a good night's sleep, and it helps them feel so much better. And they learn how to do that and manage themselves, and it works so well. It's amazing. That's a huge thing, is this kids should not have their phones at night. And quite often I hear families, or the kids will say, well, it's my alarm.
They do.
Well, buy an old-fashioned alarm clock. You can get them at Walmart for very inexpensive, and that will be better for you by far. Or I listen to my music on it. Okay, well, there's other devices we can do music on, other things, definitely. So it's just kind of something to think about, because if they have the phone in the room with them, they're going to be checking it more than likely. And because they think that they need to be there for their friends, or they might miss something important that everyone's talking about. And those two things are having a huge impact on kids.
So they're not only carrying their worries, they're carrying their friends' worries.
Exactly.
Trying to fix things that they can't fix.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it makes it really, really difficult.
I shouldn't even say they. I've fallen into this.
Oh, yeah, adults do too.
Now.
Yeah, there's a lot of adults who do. And then some kids, I talk to them about, the idea of like Instagram or Snapchat or things like that. Just, how is that impacting your life? Well, how would it be better if you didn't have it? How would it be harder if you didn't have it? We talk about all the reality of it. And I've had kids say, I'm deleting it right now. And they delete those apps right on their phone right then. And they give it a week, and then we talk, and they feel so much better.
Anxiety goes down.
Yes, they're shocked at how much it changes.
So think about what they're facing now. They're not even getting any face-to-face interaction with their friends.
Right.
So they're not really going to be open to getting rid of their social media.
No.
But yet they're on it so much more, and it's not even fulfilling the God-given need that we have to be in relationship. So no wonder we're seeing a rise in depression and maybe even suicide, because kids are like, if this is what life is going to be like, I don't want to live this way.
Yeah. And they need to have hope for their future, definitely. And those are not areas that are going to give them hope, but limiting that screen time. That's what we talk about, having a balance. And if you have access to a lot of their stuff, then there's going to be balance there, and that's okay too. Yeah, definitely. 10 warning signs. So now we're kind of start to talk a little bit more about what are some bigger warning signs of when it's actually turning into actual and generalized anxiety disorder, or some type of anxiety disorder, or depression. Because worry is not the same as depression. And so we want to kind of talk about those, because those are clinical diagnoses, and those are bigger issues. And then we'll talk about what to do if you start to see these things.
Right, because you would think everybody has a reason right now to be a little depressed.
Oh,
so when do we know?
And everyone feels anxious at times in their life. Everyone feels anxious. But the difference is chronic, and we'll talk about that. So first of all, unusual feelings of being very sad, worthlessness, hopeless, or withdrawn for more than 2 weeks consistently.
Mm.
And in this time, it's been several weeks that we've all been cooped up for so long. So it would be more that it's increased dramatically over that time,
Mm.
and lasted for at least 2 weeks, in spite of doing some of the coping skills and the things that you've been trying. Seriously trying to harm or kill themselves or making plans to do so. It's a very hard conversation to have with a young person or an adult, but it's a very important conversation that, I've had to ask kids, that do you have a plan? Would you ever end your life? And it sounds blunt and it sounds hard, but you have to ask. You can't kind of, go around, beat around the bush or anything. You have to ask. Direct is better. On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you be to take your life? Do you have a plan? Things like that are really, really important conversations to have. Severe change in behavior, severe either out of control and risk-taking behavior also. That is a huge sign. Sudden overwhelmed feeling of fear for no reason, or anxiety attacks. If they start to have anxiety attacks, or back, I'm older, so we used to call them panic attacks, but now we actually call them anxiety attacks because we know that that's what it is.
Mm.
And so their heart starts racing. They feel like they're almost having a heart attack. Their breath is really, really shallow. They really start feeling horrible. And so walking them through that is really important. And breathing, learning to breathe through that is really, really important. But it can last 15 to 20 minutes, and they're going to feel really bad afterwards because their body was just flooded with all of that, the hormones that are released and everything at that time. And so all the different chemicals. And so because of that, you kind of, if you're starting to have lots of anxiety attacks, then that is a concern, definitely. Change in appetite, so weight loss or weight gain. Lots of stomach aches. If there's stomach aches all the time, there's not a medical reason for it. Seeing, hearing, or believing things are not real is a really big one. If that is happening, definitely need to seek professional help. Repeatedly using drugs or alcohol to numb their feelings and avoid the uncomfortableness of life, or worry, or in this point in time, even more so. Because if kids are home all the time and families are home, if the parents have maybe pain medication or alcohol or things like that around, then kids have access to it. And then quite often, they can sneak that just to escape from how they're feeling, and maybe with the pressure of trying to do online school or losing graduation or any of that kinds of things. So it's really important to keep an eye on that stuff. Dramatic changes in mood, behavior, personality, sleeping patterns, loss of interest in what they used to love, energy levels, relationships, grades, all those kinds of things are really, really, really important to look at. Extreme difficulty in concentrating or staying still, and then intense worries or fears that might get in their way of their daily activities. If they can't function, if they can't do anything, then that's a huge warning sign, definitely. And if it is chronic like that and you start to see that happening over and over again, I really encourage you to see a therapist or talk to the school counselor, because I know as a school counselor, I get people emailing me right now because we're still in school. And so they could definitely email me for questions or help. And then I can refer them to different areas. And a therapist, by law, every medical insurance must provide counseling or therapy, and it's usually the cost of the copay to see a doctor. So whatever the copay is would be what it is, but they do have to provide it. So you don't have to pay out-of-pocket costs if you have health insurance. If you have no health insurance, then there are resources available too for you as well. And the school counselor can help you find those, or 211. Remember 211.org or 211, just even calling, they can provide some of that, those resources for you. But that is something that is really important, that if you're starting to see this, these signs are starting to come up, it's not going away, you're trying coping skills, then it's really, really important to get your child into a therapist and have some professional help, because that's beyond. And they can help walk you and your child through how to manage that, and then how to let that go, and then hopefully walk away from it. And that's a really important consideration.
It's good.
How do you start a conversation? Well, educate yourself. So kind of know the risk factors. Start a conversation, be straightforward. Like I told you, when I have a conversation where I'm worried a child may take their life, then I just have a straightforward conversation. And it's calm. And if they tell me yes or no, then we just go on and keep talking about it. And again, you just stay calm and patient with them, and they kind of see that, and they'll also, if that's what you're modeling, then that's going to be important for them. So let them know that you've noticed maybe a drop in grades or moods, the things that you've noticed that you're concerned about. Be open. Let them know that you're there for them no matter what. And so the fear is quite, for teens, it's hard to open up a lot of times, but they need to know that they can tell you anything, and that you will love them, and they will still be important, and you will help them through whatever it is. But you have to model that too. Invite your teen to talk while you listen. Be available, but not intrusive. Persistent, but not invasive. You can't force them to tell you. So I hear this, you better tell me you need to tell. No, that doesn't work. And so normalizing is important. Just talking about if you have ever been affected by anxiety or depression, or you might have a family member or a really good friend, it helps to normalize it for them. So you can talk about that. And sharing that experience kind of helps them. To see that, it does happen, definitely. And then how do we walk through that? And so it normalizes it for them. Asking clarifying questions can be good as well. So you can get as much information and what's going on there, because depression and anxiety are very different, and they have different treatment and different therapies and stuff sometimes. Sometimes you can use the same one, like a cognitive behavioral therapy is a very common one that's used that has a lot of success. And then encourage treatment, really talking to them about seeing professional help. And that's okay. Just like if our physical body was not doing well, then we need to go in and see the doctor. One that I give quite often is that, for example, I have a family member with diabetes, and seeing the doctor for diabetes is very, very important. And just pretending like he doesn't have it isn't going to work, or getting him just to go out and do this or that isn't going to work. He needs to seek professional help, and he has, thankfully. And the other part of it is the idea of possible medication. That is a big issue that comes up for a lot of families. If I see a therapist, they're just going to put on medication. No, not necessarily. Because we know that medication alone by itself is not nearly as effective as it is possibly with actual therapy. But just like a diabetic who has to take their insulin, sometimes students will have to take a medication to help them walk through this time of their life. I wouldn't tell a diabetic to not take their insulin, because it's what their body doesn't have and it's what it needs. And quite often, in anxiety and depression, we know that there can be chemical imbalances, there can be things that their body's lacking. And so we're providing it. It's like the idea of having a broken arm. So we put a cast around it, but the cast isn't there forever. It's only there till the arm heals or until the body heals. And then we take the cast off. So quite often that's what medication can be. It can be like the cast to give the support until students or family, or kids are able to get the support and the coping skills and get to the point where then they can start to wean off of it. So that does happen sometime, but please do not feel that if you're going to a therapist, they're just going to put them on medication, because that is not true. That is a myth. But it is a conversation you can have with a therapist, definitely. And don't minimize them and tell them they shouldn't be feeling that way, or everybody feels that way sometimes and it's no big deal. So snap out of it, cheer up. Oh, you shouldn't feel that way. That does not work. It just negates their feelings, and then they'll shut down. They won't talk to you about it. Don't judge. It is really important, that sometimes I hear people say things like, well, you have no reason to be, anxious or depressed, boy, when I was growing up, I had to do this and this and this and this, and you have it so easy, and you have it so, that does not work.
It's not like I ever said to my children, we don't live in an apartment in New York, it's better, stop complaining. But yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. So instead, okay, your child did not choose to have anxiety or depression, and that's really, really important to understand. And if you want your teen to be open with you and honest with you, it's really, really important that they trust you and that you hear them. And listen, not just hear, I should say. Using words like crazy does not help at all. And that's, then they feel stupid or unsupported.
Oh, using the actual word crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you meant just talking at them too much.
No,
it.
Sorry.
Okay.
Calling them crazy.
Don't call them crazy.
Yes, sometimes you hear people say that. Well, you're not crazy. Yeah, that doesn't help at all. And so again, people with mental health issues, it's a health issue is the really important thing there. It is not that they are crazy. They have a mental health illness. And so they need help with that. And don't argue or blame them. Well, if you'd only do this, then you'd feel better. That doesn't work. I hear that sometimes, and that doesn't work. So please don't blame them. Again, they did not choose to have that. And so again, just like, different diseases or things like that come up, you don't choose necessarily to have it. It's something that happens to you.
Well, and I think they want to feel better. They just don't know how.
Exactly. And that's why seeking help, walking through some of these ideas and strategies first, and then definitely seeking help. But if your child ever states that they really feel that they are suicidal, that maybe, 7, 8, 9, 10, if they have a plan, it's really, really important that you seek professional help immediately. And there are some places to go to. Definitely emergency room is one. Children's Hospital is a very good one. They have a very good program there. But also, calling ahead of time for a screening unit or something like that can be good, so that you know where to take them specifically, especially in this pandemic time. That if you take them in to be screened, that you know where to go and how to do it. And 211 also has a lot of those phone numbers on it available for you for emergency screening units and things like that. Okay.
It takes a village.
It does.
So if you notice, even if you follow your friend's kid and their Instagram account and you see something or they say something, tell. We know youth workers and our mentors are mandatory reporters, and we always say, when in doubt, report or call someone right away, because we don't want to blow it off, especially if they've already struggled a little bit with depression and we know it's just been escalated given our circumstances. Do something.
Yeah. And it's true, even if it's not your child, if it's your child comes to you and tells you that they have a friend, it's really important to encourage them to help, let you know, and so that you can help that person get the help that they need. And again, I mostly work with high school kids, so sometimes just a blunt conversation is very important. And I say, unfortunately, it is very, very true that it's better to have a mad friend than a dead friend. And it's better to have a mad teen than a dead teen. And so getting them help is more important. And, telling that your friend is, possibly has the ideas of suicide, definitely that conversation needs to be had. And so they are not tattling on the person. They're not giving away the trust or anything. In fact, they care about them so much that they would rather lose that friendship and make sure the person is safe than to have a friend that they didn't, but is no longer there. And how would that feel? That would feel horrible if you could have done something and you didn't. So it's better to be a little overly careful, cautious with it.
And it doesn't mean we're bad parents or a bad youth worker.
No.
Or anything. It's okay to ask for help. You can't just make your kid their favorite dinner and think it's all going to go away.
No.
So yes, we have to humble ourselves and seek help.
Yes. And again, we're talking about this chronic idea. So because, they might feel better for a day or two, but then in, 6, 7 days, it gets hard again, then that's more chronic. So important to understand that, definitely. And it's, again, it's something that they have. It's not something that everyone did. So questions, you can see them there, definitely. Do you often feel sad or anxious or empty or numb? Do you feel hopeless? That's a really important consideration. Have you lost interest in things that you used to like? Do you feel worthless or helpless or angry about stuff, guilty? Do you find yourself spending more time alone and withdrawn? Are your grades going down? How are your sleeping habits? Do you always feel tired or empty? Do you feel restless? And do you have anxiety attacks? And talking to them about what they are and what they look like, that's an important conversation. Do you feel like you're having trouble concentrating or remembering things, focusing like on your classwork? Is your heart racing? Are you having difficulty breathing at time? Do you have unexplained headaches and pains and stomach aches chronically? And then again, if you're thinking about dying or suicide or harming yourself, definitely important considerations. But it's not just necessarily that somebody's tired or they can't concentrate on online school because the video is boring. That's normal, right? And we're talking about, again, chronic, long-term in all areas of their life, not just in one area.
And it's continual.
Continual, right, exactly. So I always say inhale hope and exhale fear. So we have hope in God and our Creator, and we can exhale that fear because He is there for us and will walk us through this. And that reminds us to take our deep breaths that we really need to take to help us be calm and to help our kids be calm too. And then I do have available another time. If Tina would like to post this, definitely, and she can. But there are some little videos to watch if you'd like to, just talking about how kids feel quite often and what the difference is for a lot of kids, and how when they get help, it helps them out. And then there's some more resources on the slides as well. And so
that's awesome. We'll post those in the comments, the resources, and I'd love to do the questions too that you just went through.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
just
feel free to use what you need
for my own kids, and when we're meeting with the kids that we work with, and you're like,
yes, and especially, we always share resources with everybody all the time because that's just what you should do. But also during this time right now, in the midst of this pandemic, we need to be sharing resources. And honestly, I got most of this information from other places. And so I just put it all together because it's things that I work with quite often. And it was really nice to be able to pull some of the things that have been coming out right now for schools and pull it all together and be able to put it in a presentation from you. So this is not all my original stuff. This is all from other people and other places that have come together to try and talk about this, because we are seeing an increase and we are worried more now for our kids than in the past. And so feel free to use any of the parts you want to.
Okay, great.
Yes, but I'm not taking credit for it all.
Well, we just appreciate you. We love that you love Jesus and love kids, and just thank you for taking the time to share with us. Yeah, and if you have any questions for her, we can connect you, or Youth for Christ is here to help you as well. We're all in this together.
Yes.
Thanks, friends. Till the next time.
Bye-bye.